By the end of this video, you'll know how Romans kept a precise slope across 87 kilometers, why one aqueduct never stopped running for 2,000 years, how engineers prevented pipes from slowly sealing themselves shut. What one commissioner discovered had been stolen from Rome's water supply. Right now, in the Italian countryside, water is flowing through a channel that Romans built before the birth of Christ. No pump, no motor, no modern intervention, just gravity and stone, working exactly as designed. Rome built 11 major aqueducts. Together they moved over 1 million cubic meters of water into the city every single day. That is roughly 4 times what New York City consumes today. To understand why that number is staggering, think about the city these channels were feeding. By 100 AD, Rome had a population somewhere between 800,000 and 1 million people. That made it the largest city on Earth. Clean water did not arrive by accident. The Romans decided, generation after generation, to solve the problem at its source. They went to the mountains and brought the mountains to Rome. The first aqueduct was the Aqua Appia, finished in 312 BC. It ran underground for almost its entire length, 11 miles from source to city. Romans were suspicious of exposure. Open channels invited contamination, sabotage, evaporation. So the early engineers buried their work in the earth, routing it through tunnels, cut by hand, into volcanic rock. Thousands of laborers, years of effort. All for a channel roughly half a meter wide. The real engineering challenge was gradient. Water only flows downhill. Get the slope too steep, and the current scours the channel walls apart. Get it too shallow, and the water stagnates and stops. Roman surveyors hit on a gradient of roughly 1 meter of drop for every 4,800 meters of run, about a 0.02% slope. They maintained that gradient across hills, valleys, and rivers using nothing more than a leveling instrument called a chorobates and their own accumulated experience. When the terrain dropped away, they built arches. This is the image most people carry, the great stone arcade striding across a valley. But those arches were not just aesthetically pleasing. They were the answer to a structural problem. A solid wall of stone would catch wind and crack under its own lateral pressure. An arcade lets the wind through. Each arch transfers its load down through the piers into the ground. The Romans figured this out by watching arches fail and building the next ones differently. The Pont du Gard in southern France is the best surviving example of this logic. 3 tiers of arches, stacked 49 meters high. The lowest tier carried a road. The middle tier crossed the river gorge. The top tier carried the water channel, a narrow covered trench less than 2 meters wide at the top. The entire structure was assembled without mortar on the lower tiers. Just cut stone, fitted so precisely that the joints have barely shifted in 2,000 years. Inside the channel itself, the Romans solved a problem that still trips up modern plumbers: mineral deposits, hard water leaves, calcium carbonate on every surface it touches. Leave it long enough and you seal the pipe shut. Roman engineers lined their channels with opus signinum, a waterproof render made from crushed terracotta mixed into lime mortar. It was hard, smooth, and slightly acidic. That chemistry slowed the mineral buildup. Some channels still show their original opus signinum lining intact and functional. By the time Sextus Julius Frontinus was appointed water commissioner in 97 AD, the aqueduct network had grown beyond anyone's complete understanding. Frontinus was a former consul, a military man, not an engineer. He spent his first year simply walking the system. What he found appalled him. Illegal taps drilled into supply lines, maintenance records no one had updated in decades. Channels running half empty through fraud, half full through graft. Frontinus wrote it all down. His treatise De Aqueductu is one of the most precise technical documents to survive from the ancient world. He recorded the source of each aqueduct, its length, its gradient, its volume. He listed the legal allocations of water to every district in Rome: public baths, private households, imperial estates. He noted exactly where the siphons ran, where the settling tanks stood, which arches had been patched and which had not. Without Frontinus, we would know almost nothing specific about how the system actually worked. What Frontinus also recorded was the scale of what Rome had quietly built without quite realizing it. The Aqua Anio Novus, the newest of the 11, ran for 87 kilometers from its source in the Anio River valley. To put that in perspective, 87 kilometers is roughly the distance from London to Oxford and back. All of it engineered to fall, continuously and evenly, toward a single city. The total combined length of Rome's aqueducts was over 500 kilometers. Inside Rome, the water entered a castellum, a distribution tank. From there, lead pipes branched off to public fountains, baths, and private homes. The fountains ran continuously. Overflow drained into the sewers and flushed them clean. The system had no shut-off valve in the modern sense. It was designed to run without stopping. Citizens drew their water from street-level basins fed by constant overflow. The poorest resident of Rome in 100 AD had better access to clean running water than most people on Earth had a century ago. Then Rome contracted. The Western Empire weakened through the 5th century. Maintaining the aqueducts required thousands of workers, constant inspection, and centralized funding. When the political structure that paid for all of that eroded, the aqueducts followed. Some were cut deliberately during sieges. Ostrogothic forces severed several Roman channels in 537 AD during their campaign against the city. Without maintenance, silt accumulated. Arches cracked, channels dried. But not all of them. The Aqua Virgo, built in 19 BC, never stopped running. It ran mostly underground, which shielded it from both attackers and weather. Medieval Romans used it. Renaissance popes used it. In 1762, Nicola Salvi built the Trevi Fountain at its terminal point. Today, the Aqua Virgo still feeds the Trevi, still following the same underground course it has followed for over 2,000 years. The fountain is not decorative. It is the end of an ancient pipe. Elsewhere in the Roman world, aqueducts in Segovia, Tarragona, Carthage, and Caesarea have survived above ground in near-complete condition. The Segovia Aqueduct in Spain still stands 28 meters tall at its highest point, 166 arches, 20,400 granite blocks, assembled without mortar or clamps. The Spanish government used it as a functional water supply until 1973. It ran for roughly 1,900 years of continuous use before they finally switched it off. What these structures represent is something harder to build than stone arches. They represent a political commitment to public infrastructure, the decision that water was not a privilege but a baseline condition of life in a city. When that commitment held, the water flowed. When it collapsed, the city shrank. The Aqua Virgo is still moving water under Rome right now, 2,043 years and counting. We build our cities on assumptions we rarely examine. The Romans built theirs on concrete and gravity, and so far, the gravity has not let them down. What does it say about a civilization that its plumbing outlasted everything else it built? Tell me your take in the comments below.